Hey guys, Miss.Roopa here. I wanted to start a chapter book series with you guys called Calendar Mysteries. Since we are in the month of March, this month's book is called March Mischief. This series is by Ron Roy and it's illustrated by John Steven Gurney. Since this is a chapter book, there are not many illustrations to go with it, but if there are, I will make sure to put them in the video for you guys to see. Chapter 1, A Leprechaun Named Pal. "Batman!" shouted Nate. "A pirate!" yelled Brian. "Groucho!" cried Lucy. It was Friday, March 15th. In 2 days, it would be St. Patrick's Day. Every year, people in Greenlawn had a St. Patrick's Day contest. They dressed leprechaun statues in funny outfits. The mayor chose a winner, and there was a prize. Everyone who entered the contest brought a leprechaun statue for $5. The money went to help a local food bank. The 4 kids had chipped in and bought their statue together. They were on Bradley and Brian's front porch with a cardboard box of costumes. The kids were trying costumes on the leprechaun and on themselves. Lucy was in first grade with the 3 boys. She was staying with her cousin Dink Duncan for a year. Her parents were in Arizona helping to build a school on a reservation. Nate Hathaway and his big sister, Ruth Rose, lived next door to Dink on Woody Street. Bradley and Brian Pinto were twins and lived with their parents and older brother, Josh, on Farm Lane. Pal, the Pinto's dog, sniffed the green leprechaun statue. It stood about 2 feet tall. The statue looked like a little green man with a bow tie. Its face had plump green cheeks and a green beard. Green buckled shoes were on its feet. Pal licked the leprechaun's face. "Hey, that gives me another idea," Bradley said. "Why don't we dress the statue as Pal?" "Huh?" said Nate. "A leprechaun dog?" "Sure, why not?" Bradley asked. "Everyone else will make theirs some sports hero or comic book guy. We'd be the only ones with a dog." "Can we do that?" Brian asked. "Why not?" Bradley asked. "The mayor's rules didn't say it had to be human." "That's a great idea," Lucy said. "We can make floppy ears, a tail, and a doggy nose. And we can name it Pal." Bradley pulled off the hat he'd been trying on and ran inside. A minute later, he came back with a box of art supplies. Bradley took out scissors, glue, clay, markers, and construction paper. The kids spent the rest of the afternoon changing the leprechaun into a basset hound. Lucy made floppy ears. They looked just like Pal's ears. Nate molded some brown clay into a nose. Brian used a tube sock for the tail. He made brown marks on it, like the ones on Pal's tail. "It doesn't really look like a dog," Brian said. "He needs fur." "Well, I have an idea," said Bradley. He went in the kitchen to Pal's bed. Pal liked to sleep on one of Bradley's old brown sweaters. Bradley grabbed the sweater and took it outside. "What are you doing?" Brian asked. "You'll see," Bradley said. He cut out the sweater's sleeves off. Then he pulled it over the leprechaun's head. The sweater made the leprechaun look furry. Well, sort of. "He looks good," Lucy said. "He smells really bad," Brian said. Bradley put his nose next to the leprechaun. "Well, it's just a sweater," he said. "Well, if the mayor picks the smelliest statue, we should win," Nate said. Pal barked at the leprechaun. He rubbed his nose against the sweater. Then he curled up near its green feet and went to sleep. Chapter 2, Lost Leprechaun. Bradley woke up thirsty the next morning. He knew there was a carton of orange juice in the fridge. His stomach growled. Maybe he'd find donuts in the kitchen, too. He looked over at his brother's bed. Brian was sound asleep. Bradley slipped out of the room. He tiptoed down the hallway and stairs so he wouldn't wake his family. The kitchen clock said 7:30. The sun was starting to shine through the window over the sink. Bradley smiled. He didn't see any donuts, but he poured himself a glass of juice. He drank it and listened to a few birds outside the window. Then he remembered the leprechaun statue on the porch. He wanted to check it out again before the contest the next day. Bradley opened the front door. He stepped out on the porch in his bare feet. Then he gasped. The leprechaun was gone. Bradley turned and ran back inside the house. He bumped into Josh in his pajamas. "Whoa, slow down. What's the matter?" Josh said. "The leprechaun is gone," Bradley shouted just as his parents came into the kitchen. "What's wrong?" his mother asked. "Why the shouting?" "The leprechaun ran away from home," Josh said, cracking a grin. Bradley raced up the stairs to his room. "Get up, Brian," he shouted. He yanked off his pajamas and started getting dressed. "What's all the yelling?" Brian asked. One of his eyes peeked out from under the bed covers. "The leprechaun is gone," Bradley said. Brian sat up. His hair was all spiky. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Bri, it's not on the porch where we left it," Bradley said. "Someone must have stolen it." Brian yawned. "Who would want a smelly old leprechaun?" he asked. Bradley tossed a pillow at his brother. "I want it," he said. Brian ducked from under the pillow. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Look for it," Bradley said. He pulled on his sneakers, "and you're going to help." 2 minutes later, Bradley and Brian were in the backyard. "Brad, if someone stole it, why are we searching our own yard?" Brian asked. Bradley peered inside clumps of bushes. "Maybe someone hid it out here to play a trick on us." The brothers looked under the shrubs, in the barn, and even up in the trees. Their mother opened the back door. "You boys come in and eat some breakfast," she said. Bradley and Brian walked back onto the kitchen. Before sitting down at the table, Bradley called Lucy. "Someone stole the leprechaun," he told her. "Call Nate and come over." "Maybe someone just took it for a joke," the boy's mother said after Bradley hung up. She looked at Josh. "Don't look at me," he said. "It's probably your buddy Nate. He loves playing jokes on people." Bradley thought about Nate. Would he steal the leprechaun they had all worked on so hard? While they were eating oatmeal, the phone rang. Josh jumped for it. "Hello?" he said. "Just a minute." Josh placed the phone next to Bradley's orange juice. "It's for you," he said. "Someone with a bad cold." Bradley picked up the phone and said, "Hello?" "Lucky O'Leary stole your leprechaun," a hoarse voice said. Then the caller hung up. Chapter 3. The Big Blue House. Bradley stared at the phone. "Who was it?" his mother asked. "I don't know," Bradley said, "but whoever it was said Lucky O'Leary took our leprechaun." "Lucky?" said the boy's mother. "That's absolutely absurd. He's such a nice boy." "It can't be Lucky," Josh said. "He's away at college." "He comes home for the weekend sometimes," Brian said. Just then, someone knocked on the door. Bradley let Nate and Lucy in. They sat at the table while Bradley told them about the phone call. "Who is Lucky O'Leary?" Lucy asked. "He's this college kid we know," Josh said. "Trust me, he'd never steal anything. And he's rich," Nate said. "Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose helped him find $1 million lottery ticket." "Wow," Lucy said. "And you don't even know who called you?" Bradley shook his head. "He had a hoarse voice, though," he said. "Could it have been a girl?" Lucy asked. Bradley shrugged. He tried to remember the voice. "It was so hoarse, I couldn't tell. It could have been a girl, I guess," he said. Bradley took the last bite of his oatmeal. "Come on, let's go to Lucky's house." "What are we going to say to him?" Brian asked. "We can't just accuse him." "I won't," Bradley said. "I'll tell him about the phone call." The kids all wore sweaters. The day was windy, but not too cold. Pal was on his leash. He trotted along happily, sniffing the ground. "Where does Lucky live?" Lucy asked as they cut through the school playground. "On Robin Road," Nate said. "He's got about 100 brothers and sisters, and every one of them has red hair." The kids hiked down Main Street. They took a right on Bridge Lane, next to the fitness center. When they came to Robin Road, Bradley pointed. "That's where Lucky lives." It was a big blue house. The front yard was covered with bikes, balls, and other toys. 3 boys with red hair were kicking a soccer ball. A short girl with red hair was sitting on the porch steps. A leprechaun statue stood next to her. It was exactly like Bradley's statue, except it wore a dress, a blonde wig, and had lipstick. Cardboard wings were glued to its backs. The wings were shiny with silver glitter. "Don't look!" the girl yelled when she saw Pal and the kids. She stood up to block her fairy princess leprechaun. The kids walked toward the blue house. "Hey, guys!" one of the red-headed boys shouted. Bradley let Pal off his leash. Pal trotted over to a red wagon and began sniffing. "Is your brother Lucky home?" Bradley asked. "He's in the house," said the girl. Her face was all freckles and a big smile. She walked over to pet Pal. "He came home from college for the leprechaun contest," one of her brothers said. Nate nudged Bradley on the arm. Just then the door opened. A tall guy with red hair stepped out onto the porch. He looked at all the kids. Then he glanced at his watch. "Hi, Lucky," Bradley said. All of a sudden, he felt foolish. Was it possible that Lucky would steal a silly leprechaun? But what about that phone call? "Yo, Bradley. Or is it Brian?" Lucky said. "Bradley," he said. I got a phone call this morning and suddenly they all heard a siren. Seconds later, a police cruiser turned the corner and parked in front of the blue house. 2 police officers got out. And that's where we're going to end for today. Tomorrow, we will start chapter 4, and the name of that chapter is called Mischief. See you guys tomorrow.